The February night in Nashville carried an unusual warmth for the season, but inside the Schermerhorn Symphony Center, the air was electric with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across 1,200 guests dressed in their finest evening wear, all gathered for the annual Country Music Heritage Gala, a prestigious event that raised millions for music education programs across Tennessee. The venue's limestone walls and perfect acoustics made it the ideal setting for a night celebrating the legends who had shaped American country music. Reba McEntire stood backstage in her dressing room, adjusting the embroidered collar of her midnight blue gown. At 69 years old, she remained one of country music's most beloved figures, her voice still carrying the power and richness that had defined her 4-decade career. Tonight, she was scheduled to perform a medley of her greatest hits before presenting the Lifetime Achievement Award to her dear friend and mentor, Dolly Parton. 5 minutes, Reba, called stage manager Gregory Walsh through the door, his Boston accent still thick despite 20 years in Nashville. Reba took a deep breath, her fingers instinctively touching the turquoise pendant her mother had given her before her first Grand Ole Opry performance in 1977. The familiar weight grounded her, as it always did before major performances. Through the monitor, she could hear host Barbara Jean Montgomery keeping the audience entertained with anecdotes about country music history. The performance went flawlessly. Reba's contralto voice filled every corner of the Symphony Center, her rendition of Fancy bringing the audience to their feet. As the applause thundered through the hall, she transitioned into Consider Me Gone, her voice dropping to those rich lower registers that had become her signature, then soaring to demonstrate the remarkable range that still stunned audiences after all these years. When the final note faded, Reba smiled genuinely at the standing ovation. She retrieved the Crystal Award from the wings and returned to center stage, the spotlight catching the facets of the trophy and sending rainbow flecks dancing across the first few rows of seats. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reba began, her Oklahoma accent warm and familiar, "there are very few people in this world who transcend music itself. People who become living legends not just for their talent, but for their heart, their generosity, and their unwavering dedication to lifting others up. Tonight we honor someone who embodies all of that and more. Please welcome to the stage, the incomparable Dolly Parton." The audience erupted. Dolly emerged from stage left, her platinum hair perfectly styled, wearing a stunning white gown covered in rhinestones that sparkled like stars with every movement. At 79 years old, she moved with the grace and energy of someone half her age, her smile as bright and genuine as it had been when she first arrived in Nashville as a teenager with nothing but a guitar and impossible dreams. The two women embraced warmly. Reba presented the award, and Dolly accepted it with tears glistening in her eyes. She gave a heartfelt speech about her journey, about the people who had believed in her, about the responsibility that came with success. The audience hung on every word. Then, just as everyone expected her to conclude, Dolly paused. A mischievous glint appeared in her eyes, the same look that had preceded some of her most memorable moments throughout her career. "You know," Dolly said, her Tennessee accent thick with emotion, "Reba just gave us one heck of a performance tonight. That voice of hers still gives me chills." She turned to face Reba directly. "But honey, I've been thinking about something lately. We've known each other for what, 40 years now?" Reba nodded, curiosity and affection mixing in her expression. "Just about, yes. And in all that time, with all your incredible talent, there's one song of mine you've never recorded, never performed publicly." Dolly's smile grew wider. "Now, I'm not sure if that's out of respect or fear, but tonight I want to change that." A hush fell over the audience. Reba's heart began to beat faster. She knew exactly which song Dolly meant. "Reba McEntire," Dolly announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the Symphony Center and to the millions watching the live television broadcast. "I challenge you, right here and now, to perform I Will Always Love You." See, not Whitney's version, God rest her soul, but my original version, the way I wrote it, the way I sang it. The audience gasped collectively, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone in the music industry knew what Dolly was asking. I Will Always Love You, in its original form, was notoriously difficult, a deceptively simple-sounding ballad that required extraordinary vocal control, the ability to seamlessly blend chest and head voice, precise breath support, and an emotional vulnerability that left the singer completely exposed. The song's range from A3 to C5 demanded transitions that could make even experienced vocalists sound strained. Reba stood frozen for a moment, her professional smile firmly in place, even as her mind raced. The bright stage lights felt suddenly hotter. Now, Dolly continued, playfully waving her hand. I'm not expecting an answer tonight. This isn't ambush television. I'm giving you time to think about it, to prepare if you want. But Reba, honey, I believe you're one of the few voices alive today who could do this song justice. I think it's time the world heard what that would sound like. What do you say? The cameras zoomed in on Reba's face. 1,200 people in the Symphony Center and an estimated 15 million television viewers across America waited for her response. Behind her practiced composure, Reba felt a storm of emotions. Honored that Dolly believed in her abilities, terrified of the technical demands, excited by the artistic challenge, and acutely aware that whatever she said next would dominate headlines for weeks. Dolly, Reba said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, you've never asked anything of me that hasn't made me better. I'm honored by this challenge. Give me a little time to do it right, and I promise you an answer. Dolly embraced her again, whispering something the microphones couldn't catch. The audience applauded enthusiastically, but the energy in the room had shifted. This wasn't just entertainment anymore. This had become a moment that would be discussed, debated, and dissected. As the program continued with other performances, Reba slipped backstage. Her manager, David Brennan, a sharp-featured man in his 50s with steel-grey hair and a perpetually worried expression, was already waiting in her dressing room, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw her, he ended the call abruptly. That was Jennifer Chen from CMT, David said, his Chicago accent becoming more pronounced with stress. They want an exclusive interview. So does Good Morning America, The Today Show, Entertainment Tonight, and about 15 other outlets. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Reba, this is huge. Dolly just made you the center of the biggest country music story of the year, maybe the decade. Reba sat down at her dressing table, suddenly exhausted. She met her own eyes in the mirror, still bright, still determined, but with lines of age and experience around them that hadn't been there when she'd first dreamed of moments like this. David, can you give me a few minutes alone? He looked concerned but nodded. Of course, but Reba, we need to talk strategy, soon. After he left, Reba sat in silence, staring at her reflection. Through the wall, she could hear the muffled sounds of the continuing gala. She thought about Dolly's song, about the story behind it, how Dolly had written it as a farewell to her mentor and business partner, Porter Wagoner, when she decided to pursue a solo career. The song was about love, gratitude, and the courage to step into an unknown future. It was about growing beyond where you started, while honoring what had made you who you were. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. A woman in her early 60s entered, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple black dress. Patricia "Trish" Holloway had been Reba's vocal coach for over 20 years. She carried herself with the straight-backed posture of someone who had spent decades training singers, and her green eyes missed nothing. "Well," Trish said, closing the door behind her. "That was unexpected." Reba laughed, but it came out shaky. "You could say that." Trish pulled up a chair and sat facing Reba. "Talk to me. What are you feeling?" "Terrified," Reba admitted. Trish, you know better than anyone what that song requires. The breath control, the transitions, the emotional nakedness of it. At my age, with my voice... Stop right there, Trish interrupted firmly. Your voice is magnificent, yes. It's changed over the years, everyone's does, but you have something now that you didn't have 20 years ago. Depth, wisdom, life experience. Your range is still extraordinary. You can hit notes from C2 to E6. Dolly's song sits well within that range. It's not about range, Reba said quietly. It's about purity. That song requires such vulnerability. One wrong breath, one moment where the technique shows and it falls apart. And everyone will be comparing it to Dolly's version, to Whitney's version. I'll be singing in the shadow of two of the greatest vocalists who ever lived. Trish reached out and took Reba's hand. Or you'll be adding your voice to a legacy. Reba, Dolly didn't challenge you to humiliate you. She challenged you because she believes in you. The question is, do you believe in yourself? Before Reba could answer, David knocked and entered without waiting. Sorry to interrupt, but Reba, you need to see this. He held out his phone. The screen showed Twitter, or rather, an absolute explosion of activity. Sucker Dolly Reba was already trending #1 in the United States. Fans were divided between excitement and concern. Country music reporters were posting hot takes. Think pieces were already appearing on music blogs. The moment had taken on a life of its own. Reba handed the phone back to David. Turn it off, all of it. I need time to think. Time is exactly what we don't have a lot of, David said. The press is going to hound you for a response. We need to control this narrative. Then tell them I'm considering it carefully and I'll make an announcement when I'm ready, Reba said, with a firmness that brooked no argument. David, I've spent 40 years in this business. I've never made a decision based on what was trending. I'm not starting now. David sighed but nodded. Fair enough. But Reba, whether you do this or not, you need to decide soon. The longer you wait, the more pressure builds. After he left, Trish remained. What's your instinct telling you? Reba stood and walked to the window. Outside, Nashville's skyline glittered in the darkness. She could see the AT&T building, locals still called it the Batman building, standing tall against the night sky. This city had been her second home for most of her adult life. She'd walked these streets as a struggling artist, as a rising star, as an established legend. Nashville had seen her triumphs and her heartbreaks, had celebrated her victories and forgiven her failures. My instinct, Reba said slowly, is that I'm 69 years old and I've spent my entire career playing it safe when it mattered. I've taken risks with my business decisions, with my acting career, but with my voice, I've protected it, guarded it. Maybe it's time to stop protecting and start trusting. Trish smiled. Then let's start working tomorrow. But Reba, if you're going to do this, you have to commit completely. Half measures won't work with this song. I know, Reba whispered, still staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Dolly was probably heading home, satisfied with the chaos she'd created. And somewhere out there, millions of people were waiting to see if Reba McEntire would rise to meet the challenge or step away from it. For the first time in years, Reba genuinely didn't know which choice she would make. Morning came too quickly. Reba woke in her Belmead estate at 6:30, having managed only 4 hours of fitful sleep. The February sunrise painted her bedroom walls in soft shades of pink and gold, but she barely noticed. Her mind was already racing with vocal exercises, with fears, with possibilities. Her phone showed 63 missed calls and over 200 text messages. She set it aside without reading them. Downstairs, her assistant Janice Crawford had already arrived and was organizing the chaos. Janice, an efficient woman in her 40s with cropped auburn hair and an ever-present tablet, looked up as Reba entered the kitchen. "Coffee's fresh," Janice said. "Also, I've been screening calls since 5 a.m. CBS wants you for a primetime special." Rolling Stone wants a cover story. The Country Music Association wants to host the performance if you agree to do it. And your sister called 3 times. She says it's important, but not an emergency. Reba poured herself coffee, savoring the warmth of the mug in her hands. Through the kitchen windows, she could see her property stretching out. Perfectly manicured lawns, bare oak trees that would bloom magnificently in a few months. And in the distance, the stable where she kept her horses. This life, this success, had been built on calculated risks and disciplined work. Nothing had ever been handed to her. "Clear my schedule for the next 10 days, Reba said. Janice's eyebrows rose. Everything. Everything non-essential. Cancel the interview with Texas Monthly. Postpone the meeting about the Vegas residency. I need time to think, to work with Trish if I decide to move forward. Should I tell people why? No, Reba said firmly. Just say I'm taking personal time. And Janice, I need you to be completely honest with me. What are people saying? Janice hesitated, then pulled up her tablet. Do you want the industry take or the fan reactions? Both. Industry first. Most people think it's brilliant publicity. Some think Dolly put you in an impossible position. A few worry it could damage your reputation if you decline or if the performance doesn't meet expectations. Keith Thompson at Billboard called it the most fascinating moment in country music since Garth Brooks came out of retirement. Janice scrolled further. Fan reactions are more divided. Your loyal fans believe you can do anything. Dolly's fans are protective. Some think you shouldn't even try because the song is so personally hers. Younger fans who came to music through Whitney Houston's version are mostly curious. And then there's the inevitable contingent saying you're both too old for this drama. Reba absorbed this information silently. What do you think? Janice looked surprised by the question. Me? Reba, I've worked for you for 12 years. I've seen you rehearse until your feet bled. I've watched you perform with pneumonia when anyone else would have cancelled. If anyone can do this, it's you. But I also think you don't owe anyone anything. You've proven yourself 1,000 times over. Maybe that's why it matters, Reba said quietly. Maybe after proving yourself 1,000 times, you need to prove something to yourself. At 9 o'clock, Trish arrived at Reba's home studio, a converted guest house equipped with professional-grade recording equipment, perfect acoustics, and a Steinway grand piano that had belonged to Reba's grandmother. The morning had warmed considerably, and through the studio windows, Reba could see the temperature had climbed to an unseasonable 68 degrees. Before we begin, Trish said, setting down her bag, I want you to listen to something. She pulled out her phone and played Dolly's original 1974 recording of I Will Always Love You. Reba had heard it countless times, but she listened now with different ears, technical ears. She focused on the breath control, on the way Dolly's voice shifted between her chest voice and head voice so smoothly it seemed effortless. She noted the places where Dolly used her signature breathy quality to convey intimacy, then brought power when the emotion demanded it. The song was deceptively simple in its arrangement, just Dolly's voice and minimal instrumentation, which meant there was nowhere to hide, no production tricks to mask any imperfection. When it ended, Trish played Whitney Houston's 1992 version. The contrast was stark. Whitney had taken the song and transformed it into a powerhouse ballad, her voice soaring over a full orchestral arrangement. It was breathtaking, but it was also fundamentally different, a triumph of technical virtuosity rather than intimate vulnerability. Now, Trish said, sing it for me. Don't think about either version. Just sing it as Reba. Reba stood at the piano. Trish played the opening chords, and Reba began to sing. She made it through the first verse smoothly enough, her rich contralto voice carrying the melody beautifully. But when she reached the chorus, where the song climbed and required a transition from chest to head voice, something broke. The shift wasn't smooth. It was audible, jarring. She stopped, frustrated. Again, Trish said calmly. They worked for 3 hours straight. Reba sang the song dozens of times, focusing on different technical elements each time. Breath support, vocal placement, the transition points where her voice wanted to break, the emotional arc of the lyrics. By noon, her throat felt tired, and she still wasn't satisfied with the results. Enough for today, Trish said firmly. You're starting to strain. The last thing we need is vocal damage. I sound like I'm fighting the song, Reba said, frustrated. Every transition feels like work. When Dolly sings it, it sounds like breathing. Dolly wrote it for her voice, Trish reminded her, and she was 30 years younger when she recorded the version everyone knows. Reba, you're approaching this wrong. You're trying to match something that already exists. Instead, you need to find what this song means to you. Why would Reba McEntire sing these words? What story is she telling? I don't know, Reba admitted. Then that's your homework, Trish said. Don't touch this song again until you can answer that question. Technique is important, but without emotional truth, it's just empty notes. After Trish left, Reba sat alone in the studio. She pulled up the lyrics on her tablet and read them as if seeing them for the first time. If I should stay, I would only be in your way. The song was about leaving someone you loved because staying would diminish you both. It was about gratitude for the past and courage for the future. It was about bittersweet farewell. Reba thought about the turning points in her own life. Her divorce in 2015 after 26 years of marriage. The plane crash in 1991 that killed her tour manager and 7 band members. The times she'd had to choose between her career and her personal life. The moments when she'd outgrown situations that once felt perfect. Her phone rang. It was her sister, Susie Luxinger. Reba hesitated, then answered. Finally, Susie said, but her voice was warm, not reproachful. I've been worried about you. I'm fine, Suze, just processing. Are you going to do it? The challenge? I don't know yet, Reba said honestly. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks I'm crazy for even considering it. Remember when we were kids and you decided you were going to rope a calf, even though Daddy said you were too small? Susie's voice carried a smile. You practiced for 3 months. You fell off so many times we lost count. And then, at the Chalky Junior Rodeo, you did it. You didn't just do it, you won. I was 12 years old with something to prove. Maybe you still do, Susie said gently. Maybe we all do at every age. Reba, you've been playing it safe for the last few years. Great albums, sold-out tours, but nothing that really pushed you. Maybe that's why this matters so much. It's not about Dolly's challenge, it's about your own. After they hung up, Reba walked out to her stable. Her horses greeted her with familiar whinnies. She spent time brushing them, finding comfort in the routine task. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Tennessee sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Need a decision soon. Pressure is mounting. Call me. But there was another text too, from a number she didn't immediately recognize. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was from Dolly. Honey, I hope I didn't cause you too much trouble. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. You've got nothing to prove to anyone, including me. But sometimes the songs we're most afraid to sing are the ones we most need to sing. Call me if you want to talk. Love, Dolly. Reba read the message 3 times. Then she sat on a bench outside the stable and called her vocal coach. Trish, she said when the other woman answered, I think I know why I need to sing this song. Tell me. Because I've spent my whole career being strong, being the queen of country, being the one who survives everything. But this song isn't about being strong, it's about being vulnerable enough to let go. It's about admitting that love sometimes means walking away. I've never let myself be that vulnerable, not publicly. I've told stories about other people's vulnerability, but I've never shared my own. There was a pause. Then Trish said quietly, Now you're ready to work. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. And Reba? Bring that honesty with you. That's the voice people need to hear. That evening, Reba called David Brennan. "I'm doing it," she said without preamble. She could hear the relief in his voice. "Thank God. Okay, we need to plan this carefully. Venue, timing, media strategy." "David," Reba interrupted, "I'm doing it my way. No spectacle, no circus. I'll perform it at the Ryman Auditorium. Intimate setting, acoustic arrangement, just me, a piano, and the song. And I'm not announcing it until I'm ready. People can wait." "The Ryman?" "Reba, that's only about 2,300 seats. We could fill an arena 5 times over for this." "The Ryman is where I became a member of the Grand Ole Opry," Reba said firmly. "It's the mother church of country music. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to put myself out there like this, it needs to be somewhere that means something, somewhere sacred." David was quiet for a moment. "Okay, I'll make it happen. But Reba, the demand for tickets is going to be insane. Then make it a charity event. Proceeds to the same music education fund the Heritage Gala supports. Make something good come out of all this attention." "You're going to give me a heart attack, but I love you," David said. "When?" Reba looked out at her property, at the life she'd built, at the sunset fading into twilight. 10 days from now, February 19th. That gives me time to prepare, but not so much time that I'll overthink it." After ending the call, Reba walked back into her house. She caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror, a 69-year-old woman with red hair, laugh lines, and eyes that had seen triumph and tragedy. She looked tired, but there was something else too. Excitement, fear, anticipation. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. The news broke at 6 a.m. on February 10th. Reba McEntire would accept Dolly Parton's challenge. She would perform "I Will Always Love You" at the Ryman Auditorium on February 19th. Tickets would go on sale that afternoon, with all proceeds benefiting music education programs. Within minutes, the announcement dominated every news cycle, but Reba didn't see any of it. She was already at Trish's studio in East Nashville, a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and soundproofing that blocked out the world. They had 9 days. "We're going to deconstruct everything you think you know about this song," Trish announced, "and we're going to rebuild it from the ground up, tailored specifically to your voice, your emotional truth." They started with breathing exercises. For someone who had performed professionally for 40 years, it seemed almost insulting to focus on something so basic. But Trish was insistent. "Your breath is your foundation," she explained. "This song has long phrases that require sustained support. If your breath is shallow or inconsistent, everything else falls apart." Dolly uses a lot of breathy technique, but that's strategic. She has the breath control to do it without losing power. You need to find your own balance. They spent 3 hours just on breathing, inhaling deeply from the diaphragm, sustaining notes while maintaining consistent airflow, learning to steal breaths at natural phrase breaks without disrupting the song's flow. By noon, Reba was exhausted and they hadn't sung a single complete verse. "Good!" Trish said, seeing her frustration. "You're breaking down your habits. Now we can build something new." They worked 6 hours a day. Trish was relentless, but never cruel. She pushed Reba to the edge of her abilities, but always knew when to pull back before causing damage. On day 3, they focused entirely on the transition between chest and head voice. This was where the song lived or died, that moment where the melody climbed and required a seamless shift between vocal registers. "Your instinct is to push from your chest voice," Trish observed. "You're trying to muscle through the transition. But this song requires finesse, not force. Let the head voice come to you. Trust that it's there." Reba tried again and again and again. Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, something clicked. The transition happened smoothly, naturally, as if her voice was water flowing from one container to another. "There!" Trish exclaimed. "That's it. Feel where that came from. Remember that feeling." But remembering it and replicating it consistently proved to be different challenges. Some attempts worked beautifully, others fell back into old patterns. Reba felt like she was learning to sing all over again. On day 5, David Brennan arrived at the studio with news. "Ticket sales crashed the website," he reported. "All 2,300 seats sold out in 4 minutes. Secondary market prices are already at $2,000 per ticket. Reba, this is unprecedented." Reba barely looked up from the piano where she was working on phrasing. "That's nice, David. Nice." He looked incredulous. "Do you understand what's happening out there? You're the biggest story in music right now. CNN did a segment on you. The New York Times published a think piece about artistic challenges and legacy. People magazine wants to do a cover story. You're not just a country music story anymore. You're a cultural phenomenon story." "David," Trish interrupted firmly, "this isn't helping. She needs to focus." I know, he said, backing toward the door. "I just wanted you to know what you've created. The whole country is watching." After he left, Reba sat silent at the piano. Trish watched her carefully. "Don't," Trish said quietly. "Don't let that into your head. This isn't about the country watching. This is about you and this song. That's all." "That's easy to say," Reba murmured. "But how do I forget that millions of people are waiting to judge me?" "You don't forget," Trish said. "You acknowledge it, then you set it aside. Reba, you've performed for millions of people before. You know how to do this." "Not like this," Reba said. "When I perform my own songs, my own style, I'm confident. I know who I am as an artist. But this, I'm stepping into sacred territory. Dolly's song, Whitney's legacy. I'm terrified I'll disrespect both of them." Trish pulled up a chair next to the piano. "Let me tell you something about Dolly Parton. She's written over 3,000 songs. She's seen them covered, adapted, transformed by hundreds of artists. Do you know why she's okay with that? Because great songs don't belong to one person. They're living things. They grow and change with every voice that sings them. Dolly didn't challenge you to impersonate her. She challenged you to bring yourself to the song. What if myself isn't enough?" "Then you'll find out," Trish said simply. "But I've spent 20 years working with your voice, Reba. I know what it can do. The question is, do you trust it?" On day 7, something shifted. Reba arrived at the studio with a different energy, quieter, more focused. She'd spent the previous evening alone, listening to recordings of herself from throughout her career. She'd heard her voice change over the decades, maturing from the bright, powerful instrument of her youth to the richer, more nuanced sound she possessed now. "I want to try something," she told Trish. "I've been fighting to make my voice do what I think the song needs. What if I let the song adapt to what my voice naturally does?" Trish smiled. "Now you're thinking like an artist instead of a technician." They approached the song differently that day. Instead of trying to replicate Dolly's phrasing, Reba experimented with her own. She found places where her natural contralto richness added depth Dolly's soprano couldn't provide. She discovered that her voice, with its slightly husky quality, brought a different kind of vulnerability to the lyrics, less girlish, more world-weary. Where Dolly's version sounded like a young woman bravely stepping into her future, Reba's version began to sound like a woman who had lived, loved, lost, and found the courage to love again, despite knowing the cost. "That's it," Trish said, and there were tears in her eyes. "That's your version of the song." By day 8, Reba could sing the song consistently well. Not perfectly, there were still moments that needed refinement, but the foundation was solid. The breath control was there, the transitions worked, the emotional truth was present. That evening, Trish suggested something unusual. I want you to perform it tomorrow, the day before the actual performance, for a small audience, people you trust. You need to sing it for someone other than me before you step onto that stage at the Ryman." Reba's first instinct was to refuse, but she recognized the wisdom in it. Singing alone in a studio was entirely different from singing with people watching, with their expectations and reactions filling the air. "Who?" she asked. "Whoever you trust, to be honest with you," Trish said. Reba thought about it, then made some calls. The next morning, 8 people gathered in Reba's home studio: her sister Susie, David Brennan, Janice Crawford, Trish Holloway, and 4 people who had been part of Reba's journey for decades: Douglas Fletcher, her longtime guitar player; Caroline West, her stylist and friend of 30 years; Raymond Turner, a producer she'd worked with on multiple albums; and Vincent Hayes, the sound engineer who had mixed her last 5 albums. "Thank you all for coming," Reba said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "I need to sing this for people I trust before I sing it for the world. I need honest reactions. If it's not ready, I need to know." She nodded to Trish, who sat at the piano. The opening notes filled the small studio, and Reba began to sing. "If I should stay, I would only be in your way." The first verse felt good. Her voice was warm, controlled, carrying the melody with confidence. She could feel the breath support working, her diaphragm steady. "So I'll go, but I know I'll think of you every step of the way." The transition came. She felt herself rise into her head voice, and this time, in front of people, it felt different. There was more at stake, but the transition held. It was smooth, natural. "And I will always love you." The chorus swelled. She let her voice open up, not forcing power, but allowing it to bloom naturally. She could feel the emotion of the lyrics, the gratitude, the sorrow, the courage flowing through her. When she finished, silence filled the studio. Then Susie was crying. Caroline had her hand over her mouth. Douglas was nodding slowly, his musician's ear clearly satisfied. "That," Raymond Turner said finally, "was something special, Reba. That wasn't Dolly's song anymore. That was yours." "I agree," Vincent added. "The technical execution was flawless, but more than that, it felt true. It felt like you meant every word." David Brennan stood and walked to Reba. "I've managed you for 18 years. I've heard you sing thousands of times, but that might be the most vulnerable I've ever heard you. It's beautiful." Trish simply smiled, saying nothing, but her expression said everything. Reba felt something release in her chest, a tension she hadn't fully acknowledged she'd been carrying. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you." That night, Reba couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the song over and over. Tomorrow night, she would walk onto the stage at the Ryman Auditorium, the venue where she'd been inducted into the Grand Ole Opry decades ago. The venue that had hosted legends from Hank Williams to Patsy Cline to Loretta Lynn, the mother church of country music. And she would sing Dolly Parton's most personal song in front of some of the most discerning music fans in the world, with millions more watching on live television. She got out of bed and walked to her window. Nashville slept peacefully below, city lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere in this city, Dolly was probably sleeping soundly, confident in whatever outcome tomorrow would bring. Somewhere, music fans were setting alarms to make sure they didn't miss the broadcast. Somewhere, critics were preparing their reviews. Reba picked up her phone and did something she rarely did. She opened Twitter and looked at the Dolly Reba hashtag. The feed was a mixture of excitement, anxiety, support, and skepticism. Reba's gonna nail this, queen of country for a reason. I love Reba, but this feels like a setup for failure. Some songs shouldn't be touched. Can't wait to hear what she does with it. 2 legends honoring each other is beautiful. She's 69. Her voice can't possibly handle this song anymore. Reba closed the app. Trish was right. This wasn't about them. This was about her and the song and what truth she could bring to it. She went back to bed and finally slept. February 19th arrived cold and clear. The temperature had dropped overnight, and Nashville woke to frost-covered lawns and crystalline blue skies. Reba stood in her bedroom, looking out at the morning, and felt strangely calm. Janice arrived at 8, with breakfast and coffee. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Ready," Reba said, and was surprised to find she meant it. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Caroline arrived at 2 to help with hair and makeup. Not too much. Tonight called for understated elegance, not showmanship. Reba chose a simple burgundy gown, fitted but not restrictive, that would allow her to breathe properly. Her hair was styled in soft waves. Her makeup emphasized her eyes, but kept her looking natural. At 4 o'clock, Trish arrived for one final warm-up session. They didn't sing the full song. Instead, Trish guided Reba through gentle vocal exercises, ensuring her voice was supple and ready without exhausting it. "Remember," Trish said as they finished, "this isn't about perfection. It's about truth. Sing from your heart, and your technique will follow." David arrived at 5:30 with the car. The drive to the Ryman took 15 minutes. As they approached the historic venue on 5th Avenue, Reba could see crowds already gathering despite the cold. Barricades held back fans, hoping for a glimpse. News vans lined the street. The marquee read, "Reba McEntire, one night only, sold out." They entered through the back, but Reba could already feel the energy of the building. The Ryman Auditorium, built in 1892 as a tabernacle, had a presence unlike any other venue. Its wooden pews and simple architecture created an intimacy that massive modern arenas couldn't replicate. The acoustics were legendary. Every whisper, every note, carried perfectly to every corner of the room. In her dressing room, Reba sat quietly. She could hear the murmur of the arriving audience through the walls. 2,300 people finding their seats, their anticipation building. A knock at the door. "Come in," Reba called. Dolly Parton entered, looking radiant in a pale pink suit. Reba stood immediately. "Dolly, I didn't know you'd be here. Honey, where else would I be?" Dolly's smile was warm and genuine. "I wouldn't miss this for the world. I'm terrified I'm going to disappoint you." Dolly took Reba's hands in hers. "Listen to me. You could walk out there and recite the phone book, and I'd still be proud of you for having the courage to try. But Reba, you're not going to disappoint anyone. I've known you for 40 years. I know your heart. I know your talent. You're going to go out there and make that song yours, and it's going to be beautiful. What if my voice cracks? What if the transition doesn't work? Then you'll be human," Dolly said simply. "Honey, people don't want perfection. They want truth. They want to see someone they admire being brave enough to be vulnerable. You've spent your career being strong for everyone else. Tonight, let us be strong for you." They embraced, and Reba felt some of her nervousness settle. "One more thing," Dolly said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small silver locket on a delicate chain. "This was my mother's. She wore it when she needed courage. I wore it the first time I performed at the Grand Ole Opry. I want you to wear it tonight." Reba's eyes filled with tears. "Dolly, I can't." "Yes, you can, and you will. Now I'm going to take my seat. I want the best view in the house for this." Dolly fastened the locket around Reba's neck, kissed her cheek, and left. At 7 o'clock, the house lights dimmed. The audience fell silent. Gregory Walsh, the same stage manager from the Heritage Gala, appeared at Reba's door. "5 minutes, Reba," he said. "The piano's set. Austin Perry is ready." Austin was one of Nashville's most respected pianists, known for his sensitive accompaniment. Reba stood, checked her appearance one final time in the mirror, and walked toward the stage. Trish was waiting in the wings. "Nothing more to say," Trish told her. "You know the song. You know yourself. Just go be Reba." The stage was set simply. A single spotlight, the grand piano, a microphone, no elaborate production, no backup singers, no orchestra, just space for truth. From backstage, Reba could see the audience through a gap in the curtain. Every seat was filled. She could see faces she recognized, fellow musicians, industry executives, journalists. And in the third row, she saw Dolly, her hands folded in her lap, her expression serene. David appeared beside her. Broadcast is live to 14 million households. But that doesn't matter. All that matters is the next 4 minutes. Reba nodded. She touched the locket at her throat. Then she stepped onto the stage. The applause was immediate and thunderous. The audience rose to their feet before she'd sung a single note. Reba walked to the microphone, the spotlight warm on her face, and waited for the applause to settle. It took nearly a full minute. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying through the Ryman's perfect acoustics. 10 days ago, a dear friend challenged me to step outside my comfort zone, to sing a song that scared me, to be vulnerable in a way I've spent my career avoiding. Tonight, I accept that challenge, not because I'm trying to compete with anyone, but because sometimes the songs we're most afraid to sing are the ones we most need to sing. This is "I Will Always Love You." She stepped back from the microphone. Austin began to play. The opening notes, simple and pure, filled the sacred space. And Reba began to sing, "If I should stay, I would only be in your way." Her voice was warm and steady, carrying the weight of years and experience. She wasn't trying to sound young or prove her range. She was simply telling the story. "So I'll go, but I know I'll think of you every step of the way." In the audience, people leaned forward unconsciously. The Ryman was so quiet that Austin's piano seemed to breathe with Reba's voice. "And I will always love you." The transition came. Reba felt herself rise into her head voice. For a split second, she felt the old fear, but then she remembered Trish's words, "Trust that it's there, let it come to you." The shift happened seamlessly. Her voice soared without strain, pure and clear. "I will always love you." In the third row, Dolly's eyes filled with tears. The second verse began, and Reba let herself sink deeper into the emotion. She thought about every goodbye she'd ever said, every door she'd closed to open another, every moment she'd chosen growth over comfort. Bittersweet memories, that is all I'm taking with me. Her voice caught slightly, not a technical flaw, but genuine emotion breaking through. She didn't try to hide it. She let it be there, let it color the next phrase. "So goodbye, please don't cry, we both know I'm not what you need." The final chorus approached. This was the moment that required everything. Breath control, emotional openness, vocal power without force. Reba felt her diaphragm engage, felt the support that 9 days of work had built. "And I will always love you." Her voice opened like a flower, filling every corner of the Ryman. Not belting, not pushing, just allowing the emotion and the technique to merge into something that transcended both. "I will always love you." The note sustained, pure and strong. Then, softly, "I will always love you." The final phrase, whispered almost, intimate and true. Austin played the last gentle chords. Silence. Complete silence. For a moment, Reba wondered if she'd failed. Then the Ryman exploded. The audience erupted to their feet. The applause was deafening, echoing off the wooden walls and vaulted ceiling. People were crying, shouting, embracing each other. It wasn't just applause, it was a release of collective emotion. Reba stood at the microphone, tears streaming down her face, overcome. She looked out at the audience and saw Dolly standing, applauding with her hands above her head, tears on her cheeks, and a smile of pure joy on her face. The ovation continued for 3 full minutes. Reba tried to speak several times but couldn't make herself heard over the noise. Finally, the crowd quieted enough for her to say, "Thank you all. And thank you, Dolly, for believing I could do this." Dolly blew her a kiss. Reba left the stage in a daze. In the wings, Trish was waiting with a glass of water and a towel. "That was perfect," Trish said simply. "That was everything it needed to be." David was there too, his phone already buzzing incessantly. "Reba, Twitter just crashed. I mean literally crashed. Too much traffic. You broke the internet." But Reba barely heard him. She was still processing what had just happened, the relief, the joy, the sense of having faced her fear and discovered she was bigger than it. Backstage began to fill with people. Fellow musicians who'd been in the audience, industry professionals, friends. Everyone wanted to congratulate her, to share the moment. Then Dolly appeared, pushing through the crowd. The two women embraced, both crying now, both laughing. "You did it, honey," Dolly said. "You made that song yours. I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you believing in me," Reba replied. "That's where you're wrong," Dolly said. "I just gave you permission to do what you were already capable of. The courage was always yours." An hour later, as the crowd finally dispersed and Reba sat in her dressing room removing her makeup, she checked her phone for the first time. The messages were overwhelming. Fellow artists, celebrities from outside music, fans, journalists, everyone was talking about the performance. One message stood out from Carrie Underwood. "You just reminded everyone what country music is really about. Not perfection, truth. Thank you for showing us how it's done." Another from Keith Urban. "Absolutely breathtaking. That's what artistry looks like." But the message that meant the most was from an unknown number. "Ms. McEntire, I'm a 16-year-old singer, and I've been terrified to audition for my school's talent show because I'm afraid I'm not good enough. After watching you tonight, I'm going to do it. Thank you for showing me that being brave matters more than being perfect." Reba stared at that message for a long time. This, she realized, was why it mattered. Not the headlines or the ticket sales or the Twitter trends, but this, inspiring someone else to face their fear. She typed back, "Be brave, you've got this. And remember, the songs we're most afraid to sing are the ones we most need to sing." The next morning, Reba woke to find herself on the front page of every major newspaper. The New York Times headline read, "Reba McEntire's Triumph, When Vulnerability Becomes Strength." Rolling Stone posted, "The performance that reminded America why Reba is queen." Even international papers covered the story. The Guardian wrote, "American country icon delivers career-defining performance." But Reba didn't spend much time reading the coverage. She was sitting in her kitchen, drinking coffee, feeling pleasantly exhausted and oddly peaceful. Janice arrived at 9 with a tablet full of interview requests. "Good Morning America wants you live tomorrow. The Today Show is offering a full-hour special. Netflix wants to do a documentary about the preparation, and the Recording Academy called. They want you to perform at the Grammys next month." "Slow down," Reba said, laughing. "What's the most meaningful opportunity?" Janice scrolled. "There's a letter here from the Country Music Hall of Fame. They want to acquire the gown you wore last night and create an exhibit about the performance. They're calling it a defining moment in country music history." Reba considered that. "Tell them yes. The gown belongs in a place where it can inspire other artists." Over the following days, Reba gave only a handful of carefully chosen interviews. She appeared on CBS Sunday Morning for a thoughtful conversation about artistry and aging. She recorded an episode of a podcast called The Courage to Create, discussing her preparation process. She declined the sensational opportunities in favor of meaningful ones. But the impact of that night at the Ryman continued to ripple outward in unexpected ways. A week after the performance, Reba received a letter from Barbara Hendricks, a 72-year-old classical soprano she'd met years ago at a charity event. The letter read, "Dear Reba, I watched your performance with tears streaming down my face. I've been retired for 5 years, convinced my voice was past its prime. Watching you embrace vulnerability and show that age can bring depth rather than diminish talent has inspired me to return to singing. I'm scheduling a comeback recital in Paris this fall. Thank you for reminding me that our voices don't expire, they evolve. Another letter came from Thomas Wright, a 38-year-old music teacher in rural Kentucky. Ms. McEntire, I've been teaching middle school music for 15 years. Every year I watch talented kids hold back because they're afraid of not being perfect. The day after your performance, I played it for my students. We talked about how you could have played it safe, how you could have declined Dolly's challenge, but instead you chose growth over comfort. 3 students who've never raised their hands in class volunteered for solo parts in our spring concert. You changed something in my classroom. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after the Ryman performance, Reba was invited to a private lunch in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. When she arrived at the restaurant's private room, she was surprised to find not Dolly, but a group of 10 women, ranging in age from their mid-50s to late 70s. Dolly stood to greet her. "Reba, honey, I want you to meet some friends of mine. These are women who've been in the music industry for decades, singers, songwriters, producers, musicians. And every one of them has a story about being told they were too old, too irrelevant, past their prime." As Reba took her seat, the women introduced themselves. Margaret Reynolds, a session singer who'd been told at 55 that her voice was no longer marketable. Jennifer Blake, a songwriter whose publishing company had dropped her at 60 for being out of touch with current trends. Patricia Moss, a steel guitar player who'd been replaced in her band by someone half her age, despite her superior skill. "We wanted to thank you," Margaret said. "What you did at the Ryman wasn't just a performance, it was a statement. You showed an entire industry that age doesn't diminish artistry, it enriches it. You gave us permission to take up space again," Jennifer added. "To believe our voices still matter." Dolly leaned forward. "Reba, when I challenged you, I wasn't just thinking about you. I was thinking about all of us, about every woman who's been made to feel invisible after a certain age. You didn't just sing a song beautifully. You started a conversation about value, relevance, and courage." Reba looked around the table at these accomplished women, each with decades of experience and talent, each made to feel diminished by an industry obsessed with youth. She felt the weight of what had happened, the responsibility and the opportunity. "What if we did something about it?" Reba said suddenly. "What if we created opportunities for women in music who've been sidelined because of age?" Dolly's eyes lit up. "What are you thinking?" "A mentorship program," Reba said, the idea forming as she spoke. "Connecting established female artists with emerging ones. A scholarship fund for women over 40 who want to pursue music education or career changes. Maybe even a record label that values experience and artistry over age demographics." "The Legacy Project," Patricia suggested. "Because we're not past our prime, we're building legacies." The lunch lasted 3 hours. By the time it ended, they had the outline of a foundation, commitments from everyone present to contribute time and resources, and a shared sense of purpose. As Reba drove back to Nashville, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 10 days of intense preparation. One 4-minute performance, and now something that might matter for years to come. Her phone rang. It was Trish. "Have you seen the news?" Trish asked. "Which news?" "A high school in Alabama just named their music program after you. A women's choir in Oregon performed your version of I Will Always Love You at a cancer benefit. And Berklee College of Music wants to do a masterclass about your preparation process for the Ryman performance." Reba pulled over, suddenly overwhelmed. "Trish, all I did was sing a song." "No," Trish said gently. "You did what you've always done. You told a truth. You were authentic. And in a world that constantly tries to make women feel like they have expiration dates, you showed up in your full, imperfect, magnificent humanity. That's not just singing a song, Reba. That's changing culture. That evening, Reba sat in her home studio, the space where she'd first struggled with "I Will Always Love You," where she'd fought through fear and doubt, where she'd ultimately found her truth. She pulled out her guitar, not for recording or performance, just for herself. She played softly, singing songs she'd loved as a girl growing up on an Oklahoma ranch, songs her mother had taught her, songs that reminded her why she'd fallen in love with music in the first place. Her phone buzzed with another message, this one from Dolly. "Honey, I've been thinking about that night at the Heritage Gala when I challenged you. I want you to know something. I didn't challenge you because I wanted to hear you sing that song, though Lord knows you sang it beautifully. I challenged you because I saw someone I admire playing it safe, protecting herself, when I knew she had so much more to give. I wanted to remind you who you are. Looks like it worked. Love you always, Dolly." Reba read the message 3 times, then called Dolly. "Thank you," she said when Dolly answered, "for seeing me when I'd stopped seeing myself." "Oh, honey," Dolly's voice was warm. "We all need someone to remind us who we are sometimes. That's what friends are for. Besides, you did all the hard work. I just lit the match." After they hung up, Reba walked out onto her porch. The March night was cool but pleasant, the first hints of spring beginning to show in the budding trees. Nashville sprawled below, the city that had been her home for most of her adult life, the city that had witnessed her rise, her struggles, her triumphs. She thought about the 16-year-old girl who'd messaged her after the performance, gathering courage for her school talent show. She thought about Barbara Hendricks planning her comeback recital in Paris. She thought about Thomas Wright's middle school students volunteering for solos. She thought about the women at that lunch in Franklin reclaiming their voices and their value. One performance, 4 minutes, but ripples that would continue spreading in ways she might never fully know. Reba had spent her career singing other people's stories, songs written by talented songwriters about fictional characters and situations. But that night at the Ryman, she'd sung her own story. A story about fear and courage, about aging and evolution, about the vulnerability required for true artistry. The challenge hadn't been to sing Dolly's song. The challenge had been to show up as her complete self, imperfections and all, and trust that would be enough. It had been more than enough. Her phone rang again. She almost ignored it, wanting to preserve the peaceful moment, but curiosity won. It was Caroline West, her stylist. "Turn on CMT," Caroline said, "right now." Reba went inside and switched on the television. CMT was airing a special called The Challenge That Changed Country Music. It featured interviews with musicians, industry professionals and fans, all discussing the cultural impact of what had happened at the Ryman. One segment showed a compilation of female artists, from teenagers to women in their 70s, posting videos of themselves singing "I Will Always Love You." Each video began with the caption, "I accept Reba's challenge," or "Because of Reba, I found my courage." Reba watched, tears streaming down her face, as woman after woman shared their voices, their vulnerabilities, their truths. The special concluded with footage from the Ryman performance. But instead of stopping at the end of the song, it showed what happened after. Reba's embrace with Dolly, the standing ovation, the tears and joy. And it showed Reba's face in that moment, exhausted, relieved, transformed. The narrator's voice said, "Sometimes the greatest performances aren't about perfect technique or flawless execution. Sometimes they're about an artist brave enough to risk everything, to step into the unknown, to choose vulnerability over safety." Reba McEntire didn't just accept Dolly Parton's challenge. She issued a challenge to all of us, To be brave enough to sing our truths, no matter how scared we are, no matter how old we get, no matter who's watching. Reba turned off the television and sat in silence. She thought about the girl she'd been, ambitious, driven, hungry to prove herself. She thought about the woman she'd become, accomplished, respected, but somewhere along the way, cautious. And she thought about who she was now, after the Ryman, after facing her fear and discovering she was bigger than it. She wasn't that girl anymore, and she wasn't that cautious woman either. She was someone new. Someone who understood that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but profound strength. Someone who knew that the greatest artistry came not from perfection, but from authenticity. The next morning, Reba woke early and drove to the Ryman. The venue was closed, but she had a key, one of the privileges of being an Opry member. She let herself in and stood in the empty auditorium, looking at the stage where her life had changed 2 weeks ago. The wooden pews were empty now. The stage was bare. But she could still feel the energy of that night, could still hear the echo of applause in her memory. She walked onto the stage and stood where she'd stood. The silence was profound. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room. To Dolly, wherever she was. To Trish, who'd guided her through the preparation. To everyone who'd believed in her. To the younger version of herself who dared to dream. To the song itself, which had demanded everything from her and in return, given her back herself. Her phone buzzed, a text from David. "Recording Academy just called. They don't want you to perform at the Grammys. They want to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award. Your answer?" Reba smiled. 6 months ago, she would have been ecstatic. It would have felt like validation, like the capstone of a legendary career. But now, standing on the Ryman stage, she realized she didn't need validation from awards. She'd found something more valuable, the courage to keep evolving, to keep taking risks, to keep choosing growth over comfort. She typed back, "Tell them I'm honored, but I'd rather just perform. I'm not done yet, not even close." Because that was the truth. The Ryman performance wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Reba walked off the stage, through the empty auditorium, and back out into the Nashville morning. The March sun was bright and warm, promising spring. She had a meeting later about the Legacy Project Foundation. Tomorrow, she was starting work on a new album. Not a greatest hits collection or a safe bet, but something experimental, something that scared her a little. She got in her car and drove through Nashville's streets, past the honky-tonks and recording studios, past the tourists taking photos and the session musicians carrying instrument cases, past the dreams and disappointments and triumphs that happened every day in Music City. She thought about a line from the song, the line that had resonated most deeply as she'd prepared. "I hope life treats you kind, and I hope you have all you've dreamed of." She had dreamed of success, and she'd achieved it. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped dreaming of growth. She'd stopped challenging herself to be uncomfortable, to be vulnerable, to be brave. Dolly's challenge had reminded her that the greatest artists never stop growing. They never stop taking risks. They never choose comfort over truth. As Reba drove home, she felt lighter than she had in years. The performance at the Ryman would be discussed and analyzed for years to come. It would be written about in music history books. It would inspire countless others. But for Reba, the greatest gift wasn't the acclaim or the impact. It was the rediscovery of herself, the remembering of who she'd always been beneath the armor of professionalism and the weight of expectations. She pulled into her driveway and sat for a moment, looking at her home, at the life she'd built. Then she got out, walked inside, and headed straight to her studio. She picked up her guitar, sat at the piano, and began to create. Not performing someone else's song, not playing it safe, just exploring, experimenting, following her instincts wherever they led. Because if Dolly Parton's challenge had taught her anything, it was this: The songs we're most afraid to sing are the ones we most need to sing. The risks we're most afraid to take are the ones that will set us free. And at 69 years old, Reba McEntire was just getting started.